take your seat again, because you will be part of our panel discussion now, and so will as well Vanessa, back on stage. Pleasure to have you. So we will now take some more time to talk about this pathway to a much more sustainable future through e-mobility. And let me explain that first to you guys, because we thought about doing it a little bit different, the panel discussion this year. Maybe you know Jimmy Fallon and the Wheel of Fortune. We do quite the same. We have a wheel of topic. So I have created 4 different topics here on my cards, but we just have time for 2 of them. So we do start our wheel of topic now, and let's see where it stops. And that will be our first topic. Let's start it. It's a long wheel of topic, we can see. Oh, it's the first one. Green tech versus clean tech. Let's see. Here we are. Green tech versus clean tech, and how sustainable could e-mobility become? Well, Vanessa, you talked about biofuel cells, so enthusiastic, just a couple minutes ago. You've been working for a startup in that field, right?
Yes, I have.
But I will give that question, Alexander, to you first, because fuel cells as the heart. How can we improve sustainability here?
Yeah, so currently I'm a bit skeptical with regards to fuel cells, I have to say. And that is because fuel cells store electricity in hydrogen. So you have electricity, you convert it into hydrogen, and you convert it back into electricity. And that is not very efficient. Nonetheless, I can imagine that in future there would be new technologies which would help improve the efficiency of fuel cells. And that would be a really great step forward, and would make the whole conversation about charge speed, charging times, etc. obsolete. But maybe that's another 10 to 20 years away, and at least at the moment, I see the development going in the direction of battery electrical vehicles in Europe.
Absolutely. You agree here?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think that especially hydrogen can be used for a number of different things as well. So, like carbon engineering, which is the hydrogen startup that we talked about, we actually combine carbon dioxide and hydrogen to make fuel that can go into a traditional car, or you could burn that and then fuel an electric car with that. So there's so many different ways to utilize that technology as well.
When I think, when we talk about sustainability and e-mobility, we for sure need to talk first of all about batteries and battery life cycle management. Are there any ideas you have here talking about the production itself to optimize it, but also the waste disposal at the very end? Are there any ideas you have? How can we do better here?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Tesla battery is currently 97% recyclable. That's scientifically possible, but not financially feasible. So it's actually much cheaper to make an entirely new battery in a car than to actually recycle it. So I think one of the most key things we have to do is we have to make it cheaper to recycle so that people have the motivation and incentive to recycle. I think that's one of the biggest things. Another technology that's interesting is Scape. Scape is basically creating a solid-state battery that would charge a lot faster than a traditional battery, as well as go for much longer than a traditional battery, and hopefully that would also be more recyclable as well.
And if I may add something there,
yeah, of course.
Or an attractive option is actually a second life for a vehicle's battery in a different use case. And be it in storing power which gets generated by wind turbines.
That's the end, waste to value again, right?
There we go.
So we're closing the circle here. So talking about alternatives, which fuel alternatives are the most promising and why?
Fuel alternatives. There's been a lot of debate about e-fuels, and Oliver Blume, the new group CEO of VW, who is starting his new job today, congratulations, is quite vocal about it. He says e-fuels will complement e-mobility, because they will help decarbonize where e-mobility couldn't achieve decarbonization very quickly. Actually, we as a company are seeing e-fuels a bit more skeptical than we did 2 or 3 years ago because of the lack of efficiency again. But if there is a fuel which can, for instance, be used in aviation or in shipping, where electrification isn't possible that easily, then it's such a synthetic fuel, so-called e-fuel.
Absolutely. I think, Vanessa, you can add here something as well, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it also depends on when we're talking about electricity and the sources of fuel that can go into that, or if we're talking about a biofuel or something like that. I mean, with electricity, obviously renewables are the way to go, and then the challenge is storage of that renewable energy. There's a number of different ways to store it outside of batteries, which is kind of our default that we normally go to. But we can also store it with hydro, which is a very time and tested technology. There's even ways that you can take various substances up cylinders and then drop them down at night when you don't have solar energy. So very simple ways that you can store energy that we can still start using today. And then in terms of biofuels, there's so many different biofuels. Obviously, I love to talk about biofuels. But of course, there's algae-based biofuels. And there's a startup called Omega, which is using algae that's grown actually on coastal communities. It provides food to a lot of those coastal communities while also providing a fuel source that can also be very affordable to those coastal communities. I think that the challenge is going to be not taking one solution and saying that's the size fits all, but actually saying, okay, this community needs this type of fuel and this type of community needs this type of fuel. I think that we shouldn't be focusing on just one solution, but really looking at each country's needs, each locality's needs.
Very individual needs, absolutely.
Address that situation, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and with regards to biofuels, they are obviously playing an important role already. And in this country, gasoline contains 5 to 10% of biofuels. Furthermore, there are biofuels under development, new biofuels under the headline Sustainable Aviation Fuel, with the aviation being a sector which is really difficult to electrify. So all that will continue to play an important role. And at the same time, let's be honest, it is somewhat limited volume-wise, quantity-wise, because you don't want to burn things which you could eat as well, right? So biofuels will continue to play an important role, but they aren't the only salvation, so to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I always recommend biofuels that don't compete with agriculture, like algae, like carbon dioxide in the air, which I hope no one's planning on eating. So things that really can be actually waste products that we then turn to value. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's something we learned in the past. There's never just one solution, especially when talking about the very different needs. It always needs to be a mixture of everything. Absolutely. So maybe you remember a couple of minutes ago, I asked Patrick the question if having competitors in your field, does it speed up or slow down processes? So what do you think in the field of economic competitiveness, does it slow down or speed up real sustainability in mobility? What do you think?
I think it speeds things up because it pushes us to innovate. I think that the biggest death of any industry is complacency. When we just make small improvements to our own machine, but don't actually get pushed to really think outside the box. And I think it also provides some alternatives. If customers are trying to be sustainable, they can pick the most sustainable option that works for them. And I think that that's an incredible advantage of having more competition in the space. I think it actually democratizes the space more and gives consumers more options to make a better choice too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I fully agree. Don't have anything to add to that.
So talking about costs, when we talk about sustainability, also, okay, what does it cost? That's why the next question is right about that. Does sustainability in mobility come with a cost? I think we all agree here, kind of. And are we accepting or bearing that cost already, or is the real cost being ignored as now? What do you think?
I think there's a huge cost to the way that we're traditionally thinking about e-mobility, which is batteries. We're very battery-centric, and a lot of the supply chain issues that come along with those batteries are incredibly damaging. There's a lot of human rights violations that are going along with those battery sourcing, and it's very hard to track. Some people are using blockchain to actually track the sustainability practices of those mining, but at the end of the day, a lot of lithium, which is one of the main sources in those batteries, it comes from deforesting the rainforest. So you have to cut down the rainforest in order to get it. So I think that's where it comes back to your recycling point. And can we recycle what we already have rather than mining and extracting and burning down what we need more of? So I think that recycling and then using as many different solutions as we can help us kind of get around that challenge that we currently are facing.
Absolutely.
And I think we aren't overlooking the real cost, as you phrased it. It's a great question, but I think the answer is it's pretty transparent and people understand it, governments understand it, companies understand it. And companies are working on getting that real cost, if you want to call it that, under control, as well as the direct cost. And maybe talking about the direct cost, an investment, for instance, in high-power charging is pretty expensive because you don't just need the chargers. You also need a medium voltage grid connection, you need a transformer, or you need a battery buffer, which saves the transformer, but then you need to buy the battery buffer. So quite a high upfront investment. And at the same time, the electrical vehicle park, at least in this country, is still pretty small. So we are expecting to start to earn money with charging vehicles in 3 or 4 years' time. And that is a little bit of an issue for the industry. From an economic point of view, industry participants should actually say, I wait with investing in charging for another 3 or 4 years. Because then my charger will see much stronger demand during its lifetime as if I built it already now. However, if everybody did that, there wouldn't be any progress and people wouldn't have the confidence that they don't need range anxiety, the confidence that they will find charge points wherever and whenever they need one, and wouldn't buy electrical vehicles. And we as a company are trying to contribute to resolving that issue. And we are investing ahead of the market because we want to promote e-mobility as an important means of taking the world to net zero. We want to become a net zero company and we want to help the world to get to net zero.
And that's absolutely important. I think that's not only in the field of mobility. We were quite ignoring things in the past decades, and now we notice we have to invest to make sure we will be there in a couple of years. And especially bringing technologies forward, you need people to be in front and to invest more than others that will follow. That's absolutely right. Okay, I think we need to move on to a second topic because I will do at least 2 of them. So let's start our wheel of topic again for our second big topic here. I hope it works. Otherwise, I'm going to choose. Oh, it's the last one. Alternative mobility. Is e-mobility the only way towards a sustainable future? We quite discussed that at some points. Yeah, I think there are some alternatives. Hydrogen, solar, natural gas, synthetic fuels, you mentioned some of them. Are they real competitors for e-mobility?
Well, they are all e-mobility. Thinking of hydrogen, a hydrogen-fueled vehicle has an electric drivetrain. It just doesn't store the electricity in a battery on board. Instead, it produces the electricity in the fuel cell on board. But it's still an electrical vehicle. So I think e-mobility, powered whichever way, through batteries or through an onboard fuel cell, will be the future in earthbound transportation. In aviation, it's probably slightly difficult to electrify everything. Some ultra short-haul flights, like from mainland Scotland to Scottish Islands, are already using fully electrical planes, but I am really struggling to imagine a jumbo jet flying from Frankfurt or London Heathrow to Hong Kong with electrical engines. The batteries would simply be too heavy. So we need to have alternatives for different sectors, like sustainable aviation fuels, and we as a company are working on that. Shipping will probably need alternatives as well. Hydrogen might be an option in shipping as well, or there will be methane-based solutions in shipping. So are there alternatives? Yes, but it depends on the use case. And in earthbound transportation, I think it will be electrical one way or the other. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this comes back to, using multiple solutions for different case studies. I mean, even when we look at carbon footprints, the carbon footprint of someone who's low income will mainly be how they eat. So if they eat meat or not. If it's for high income, then it'll be mobility, it'll be transportation. How are they choosing to transport themselves? So I think that using a myriad of solutions based on the resources of that given country is very, very important. I definitely think that natural gas definitely shouldn't be a part of that solution, though, because natural gas can be as dirty as coal depending on how you mine it. So it can be a very, very dirty source of energy. So making sure that we're using carbon neutral technologies and then just using it based on kind of the needs of that area, I think is very important.
Okay, next question. And that one popped up in my mind when I was preparing this panel discussion. Don't get me wrong, I'm an absolutely car lover. My car is my castle. But we need to talk about that. Wouldn't it make more sense to have less cars than creating more of them now, new ones? What do you think about it?
It depends. Of course, if you live in a big city like I do, like probably the two of you do, it's very easy to say, oh yeah, fewer cars. My commute to work, if I'm the last one driving, will be much nicer. No traffic jams anymore. But I could even do without the car in a big city, because I've got the infrastructure of the big city, the subway and whatever. But it's a completely different story when you live in a rural area. Even in Germany, but then think of countries as large as your country, the US. And in a rural area, there is no alternative to road traffic and to cars. So I think...
will these areas become more focused for e-mobility, for companies in that field? Will they have a closer look at these areas? What have to change, like the infrastructure, the charging, and so on? There's so many things we need to talk about.
Yeah, we're deploying chargers in rural areas already. So e-mobility is coming to rural areas. But to come back to the original question, I think it's not only us sitting here deciding, oh yeah, in big cities we might want to reduce the number of cars. It's also the preference of the consumer. And the number of cars could only be reduced if there were really good alternative offers, like fully electrical, autonomous pool taxis. And some companies like Moja in Hamburg, an affiliate of VW Group, have such pooled, fully electrical taxis already, and they want them to be fully autonomous in 3 years' time. So there's development underway, but I wouldn't subscribe to a very simple statement, if I may call it that, saying we need fewer cars. The reality is more complex.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with it. In theory, the answer is yes. Of course, less of everything would be more sustainable. If we use, all of the resources, just fewer of it, it would be better. But in terms of convenience and what people are actually going to choose, we have to make it very convenient for them. Because at the end of the day, if it's not convenient for them to choose that option, they're not going to pick the most sustainable option. So we have to make sustainable solutions very convenient. So if it's public transportation in a city, we need to be scaling that up. In the US, we definitely need to be scaling that up quite a bit more than we are. And if we're looking at a rural area, we also need to be thinking about solutions there as well. So yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. I see we have 10 seconds left. 10 seconds for you, guys. Are there any questions from your side for our panelists? Oh, yeah, we have one. Perfect. Can we get a microphone, guys? Oh yeah, and I'm gonna repeat it.
What about the solution of not having people be global? What about having them meet their needs through things like Zoom or virtual? Would that be a feature of sustainability?
Did you edit?
Yeah.
There's the microphone.
Quite hard. Maybe you can repeat
Okay.
it with the microphone. Thank you.
What about having people be less mobile and use things like virtual tools to meet their needs, or to have goods come to them, as we have done in the pandemic? Will that bring us more sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can answer part of that. I think that in terms of reducing our transportation in general, that of course will bring down our carbon emissions. But I don't think that from a social perspective, a lot of people will actually be limiting their mobility. They may be from a work perspective. I mean, we've seen a lot less business trips after the pandemic than we've seen prior to the pandemic. But in terms of our interaction, when we're thinking about really networking with people, when we're thinking about connecting with our loved ones and our family, I don't think that there'll necessarily be a limitation to us moving to go see them or traveling to go see them. So I think that that's one area that we won't see a lot of fluctuation.
Yeah, I agree. And even as far as business travel is concerned, in our company we are also replacing lots of face-to-face meetings, in particular internal meetings by video conferences. However, as long as humans work together and not machines, there will always be a value in meeting face-to-face from time to time. Not as often anymore as before. And there will always be a value in going to see a customer, and be it just because the customer will appreciate it because you made the effort to go and see him. So yes, it will help on the way to a more sustainable society up to a certain extent, but only up to a certain extent.
Perfect. That was a bit off topic, but more so very important. Any more questions? No. Then thank you very much, Vanessa, Alexander, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And for sharing your insights and thoughts with us. This is your round of applause.
My pleasure. Thank you.